Hey, what's up everybody? I'm Gambit, and today I wanted to do a quick little video going over the 19 different perks that are currently in Mordhau, giving you kind of an overview of all of them and telling you which ones I think are good and which ones aren't really worth your time. I'm not really going to talk about meme builds and, like the ones that I think are fun, but like not super useful or anything like that. I'm coming at this purely from the viewpoint of trying to get you winning more games, winning more fights, the ones that are going to help you defend yourself better, the ones that are going to help you basically last longer. Just because I tell you that a perk isn't very good doesn't mean that it's never good. I'm just saying there are certain perks in the game that are almost always worth your time if you have the points to spare, and there's other perks that are almost never worth your time. So just go into the video understanding that. As always, if this video helps you out, please leave it a like and consider subscribing if you want more content like this in the future. Also, come hang out with me on my Twitch stream. I stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday, noon to 6 Eastern. You can get all my links in the description below. Okay, so with that said, let's get into it. The first one I want to go over is Brawler. It is a 2-point perk, and basically it increases your fist damage quite substantially. But keep in mind that if you're using your fists, you can't block attacks from swords. You can't block unless someone's hitting you with their own fists. So, meme builds aside, I don't really see this as being super useful. I know if you're a god at the game, you can run into battle, dodging and weaving and just throwing punches like there's no tomorrow and never take a hit. But, if you're just a mere mortal like I am, you're not going to find that much use in this perk too often. And it's 2 points, which is really expensive. So I would leave this one alone if I were you. Okay, Acrobat costs 1 point, and basically it reduces the stamina cost of jumping by 50% from 12 points down to 6. There are definitely situations where this will come in handy. Like, for instance, if you use dodge, I would say this is a very good perk. But there's not a whole lot of scenarios otherwise where I would really recommend it. I do occasionally run into duel servers where people are jumping around like Yoda, just swinging away, and sometimes they get some kills, but a lot of the times I don't really find them to be that difficult to deal with as long as you can kind of keep your composure. I think the first time you deal with someone who's jumping around like crazy, it's a little jarring and you might get killed by them. But pretty soon you realize, unless they have dodge, they're not really moving around all that quick, and you can usually track them pretty easily, and they're quite vulnerable while they're in the air. So I personally don't recommend it. I think there are scenarios where you can find some use for it, but on the whole, I don't think this is all that useful. Fury costs 2 points. And basically, it gives you 66 stamina points whenever you get a kill. I don't hate this perk, but I think Second Wind is probably a little more versatile and a little more useful. Fury is really good if you find yourself in a 1vx scenario. You're fighting off multiple opponents at once. But otherwise, it's pretty limited because the thing is stamina recharges really fast. A lot of the time, if you're in a 1v1 even, you can usually just kind of back up and your opponent is going to kind of cautiously approach you. Sometimes they'll charge you and whatever, but you can usually heal up half your stamina in the few seconds that it takes you to back up. So at least for now, unless they change that, I don't really think Fury is all that necessary, especially because it costs 2 points, which is pretty expensive. Peasant is a weird perk. It's a meme perk, I think. I see some people absolutely wreck with the Peasant perk. Basically what it does is it prevents you from wearing armor except for a level 1 helmet, and it also prevents you from using any of the standard weapons. Here, let's just look at it real quick. So instead of having, daggers and long swords and mauls and all that, now you get carving knives, and I guess the mallet is still the same and the quarterstaff is too. But, frying pans and heavy branches, rocks, sickles, shovels, rakes, so on, pickaxes and sledgehammers. And basically it's all peasant gear if you pick this up. It also costs half your points. So, it's not awful, but I think it's more of a meme build perk and not a super useful perk. Fireproof costs 1 point, and it reduces the damage you take from fire by 80%, which is substantial. But how often are you dying to fire? 1 point isn't a huge deal, but there are other perks out there that are probably more worth your time. And even if you have like a bunch of people on your team or the enemy team who are just chucking fire pots left and right, is it really that hard to avoid the little spray of fire? Most of the time, you're not even going to die to it. Even if you don't have this perk, you might get out of there with 20 or 40 health, which, could get you killed anyway. But most of the time, you're not going to die to it. And if you are dying to it, isn't it better to maybe just take a more cautious approach to the game instead of picking up a perk? So I would personally almost never use it. I'm not saying it's not useful. I'm just saying you only got 16 points. You could probably find better use of them than this. Huntsman is interesting. If you're making an archer character, I think it's good. It costs 2 points, and if you're using a ranged weapon, you're going to do more damage when you hit them in the head or the torso if they're also carrying a quiver. So it's useful for a pure archer, especially if you're going to be focusing on other archers, which I think you should do, because the most useful that you can be to your team is distracting the enemy archers from shooting at your team. So the more archer versus archer battles that you get yourself into, the better for your team. But it's not a perfect perk, and it is quite expensive. But if you're an archer, you've probably got points to spare. You probably don't need tons of armor or anything. So I would always take Ranger over Huntsman, but if you have enough points for both, Huntsman is a good one. Friendly is one of the best perks in the game. It costs 1 point, and basically it reduces friendly fire by 50%. Both the damage that you'll do to your team and also the damage that your team will do to you is all reduced by half. Even if you're a god at the game and you never hit your teammates, this is still kind of a worthwhile perk to pick up, because how many idiots on your team have mauls and they just wind up running up behind you and one-shotting you? Not necessarily intentionally, but just because they're just running around swinging wildly, and then they hit you and you're just dead, right? I don't always pick it up, but especially if you're new to the game, this is a great perk. And especially while you're learning the game, especially when you're learning how to use high damage weapons, pick this perk up so that you don't murder your team with it, okay? Rat costs 2 points. It increases your crouch speed by 10%, and it reduces the volume of you walking and running around by 75%. This is as useless of a perk as they come, in my opinion. There's not really a whole lot of scenarios where the battle is very quiet and you're going to really benefit from reduced volume of running. Usually, both sides of the team are just spamming their like shouts, and there's catapults going off and people are screaming and dying and stuff. It's super loud as it is. I don't think this is necessary. Also, it costs 2 points, which is really pricey, in my opinion, for as little as it does for you. Cat reduces fall damage by 50%. It costs 1 point. There are certain circumstances where this would come in handy, especially like on Mountain, where they have that big sky bridge, and if you fall from that, you die. But how often are you really dying to that? If it's a lot, maybe instead of picking up this perk, you just shouldn't go on the sky bridge and, just hang out on the ground where you're safe, Wrecker basically increases your damage against structures by 50%. I don't really see this as being useful. Most of the time, if you need to bash down an enemy structure, you're going to have other teammates there with you, bashing it down with you. I see this as a waste of a perk. I want to pick it up. Smith increases your repair effectiveness by 50%. I guess if you're one of those players who are running around the battlefield with a hammer and toolbox, this would come in handy, so definitely pick it up if you're doing that. Tenacious is 1 point. It's one of the best perks in the game, in my opinion. Especially if you don't have enough points for Bloodlust. This is a great one. Basically, it increases your rate of health regeneration by 66%, so you're going to heal way faster. This is great in, not in dual servers, I guess, but in frontline mode or anything else. This is a super good perk. I definitely recommend you pick this up quite often. If you pick up Bloodlust, I don't think it's all that useful, but it's a good one. Second Wind costs 2 points. This is another great perk. Basically, every time you hit your opponent, you're going to get some extra stamina back. Very good for duels. Very good when you're doing a 1vx situation. It's just very good for helping you win the stamina game. You know, even if you're a shield user, a two-handed weapon user, a dodge user, whatever the case is, the stamina game is super important. I almost always have this perk on. There are very limited builds. Usually when I'm taking weapons that are super high point, I tend to prioritize armor above this, but otherwise, I almost always have this perk. This is probably the only perk that I always have, but it is a very, very good one. Bloodlust is another great perk. It costs 5 points, which is a lot. I mean, aside from Peasant, it costs the most in the game, but it is super useful. Basically, anytime you get a kill, you're going to get all of your health back. On dual servers, I don't think it's useful at all, but pretty much any other game mode, it is super useful, especially if you find yourself running into like 1vx situations. If you have to face multiple opponents, this perk is your equalizer, because all you have to do is focus down one opponent, get that kill, you're back to 100%, and now you get to start it over again, except now you got even fewer opponents to face. This is an absolute monster of a perk. It teams up excellently with really high damage weapons like the Maul. I love this perk. I use it all the time. I don't use it in every situation. Sometimes I prioritize armor or better weapons, and I don't have the points for it because it is quite expensive. But if I have the points for it, you better believe I'm picking this one up. Rush is another interesting perk. I don't use it almost ever, but it pairs up with high damage weapons, especially the Maul, super well. It costs 3 points, so it's pretty darn pricey. But if you use this with the Maul, you could rush into a huge team fight, just swing around, bash heads, and as soon as you get a kill, just sprint into another group of enemies and just start swinging away again. And you can just use this to sprint yourself in and out of fights really fast. It's kind of devastating once you learn how to do it. It's not great with, you know, the long sword. It's not great with a lot of weapons, but with super high damage ones, especially the Maul, it is kind of insane. But you gotta be good at the game to make use of this, I think. Fleshwound is interesting. It's more of a meme perk, if anything. Costs 2 points, and basically, unless you're headshot, getting killed doesn't actually kill you. It takes 5 extra seconds before you die. Basically, you know, when you're fighting an enemy, you hit them, and it should have been a kill shot, but instead they just start screaming like a madman, and they might be missing an arm or a leg, but they're hopping around, swinging their one good fist at you. They have this perk when that happens. I don't think it's all that good. Most likely, if they got the kill shot on you, you're not going to kill them with your fists. Most likely, they're just going to hit you again, and then you're going to die. So it's fun. It's a cute perk, but sometimes if I'm just memeing around on dual servers or something, I'll pick it up. But most of the time, I don't even bother. Scavenger costs 1 point, and basically, if you kill an enemy, they'll drop everything they're carrying. So if they have, if they're holding a Maul, but they have a long sword on their back, they'll drop both weapons. Without this perk, they'll just drop the Maul that they already had in their hands, but the long sword on their back won't go anywhere. It just vanishes from the world. I don't think this is a very useful perk. For one, you're going to have your primary weapon on you anyway. For two, especially if you're playing like Frontline or something, there's going to be so many dead people laying around. If you're looking for a specific weapon, you're probably going to find it anyway. So I just don't see this as being worth the perk point. Dodge is another very good perk. It costs 4 points, which is quite expensive, but this is a very, very good perk. It pairs really well with Acrobat. Basically, instead of jumping backwards or to the sides, which is a very slow action, if you have this perk, you'll jump quickly and quite far. I think it's like 5 feet or so. It's usually enough to avoid almost any attack from any weapon, unless it's like a super long range weapon and you are like chest to chest with them or something. But otherwise, it will get you out of danger a ton. Now, you don't want to use this perk if you're going to just spam it. For one, without Acrobat, you're going to lose the stamina game. For two, if I see someone spamming the crap out of this perk, I'm just going to charge them, and I'm just going to stick my chest to their chest, and I'm just going to stab at them and swing at them. And more often than not, I'm going to take them out. Now, if you just use this as just another one of your many tools in your kit, you know, to throw your enemy off, but they can't predict that you're always going to use it or whatever, then it's a monster of a perk, and I think you're going to get a lot of kills utilizing this thing. But it is really expensive, so you're probably going to go weaker on the armor because of this. I kind of want to use it more just to get practice in with it because it's a lot of fun to use. I dig that. I dig the kind of high mobility characters like this. So that's a good one. Ranger's our last one. It costs 2 points, and basically it lets you move quicker while aiming a bow or crossbow. This is a great perk. It is a must-have if you are an archer for one main reason. If you are in an archer versus archer battle and you do not have this perk, you are not going to be able to move fast enough to avoid hits while also aiming at your opponent. Basically, once you start aiming at your opponent, you're not going to be able to move hardly at all. If you have this perk, you're going to be able to move fast enough that you'll probably be able to dodge their attacks while still aiming down at them and shooting back at them. So if you're an archer, this is a must-have perk in my opinion. I would definitely take this over Huntsman. I'd probably take this over just about any of the other perks if you're an archer. Maybe not friendly depending on how you play, but I would not pick an archer without this skill ever. Okay, guys, so that's all I've got for you today. I hope this video helped you out. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave me that like and consider subscribing if you want more videos like this in the future. And like I said, I do stream on Twitch Monday, Wednesday, Friday from noon to 6. Come hang out with me. You can get all my links in the description below. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.